Welcome back to the Tavern, World Builders! Today we are talking about the middle-grade alien invasion sci-fi series Animorphs by K.A. Applegate. Beware for anybody who has not read this 30-year-old series. Here there be spoilers! Specifically for the first 7 books we'll be focusing on, but we'll probably have spoilers for the whole series, so just be warned. Grab an ale, zero proof always available, and pull up a chair. I'm Emma, your friendly barkeep, along with Allison.
Hi!
And Christiana.
Hello.
And we are so happy to have you here. Cheers!
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 So this story revolves around 5 teenage humans, Jake, Marco, Cassie, Rachel, and Tobias, and 1 alien, Aximili Escaruth Isthill, named Ax for human mouths to more easily pronounce, who obtain the ability to transform into any animal they touch from a dying alien, an Andalite named Elfangor. They use their ability to battle a secret alien infiltration of Earth by a parasitic race of aliens resembling large slugs called Yeerks that can take any living creature as a host by entering and merging with their brain through the ear canal. The Animorphs fight as a guerrilla force against the Yeerks, who are led by Visser III, who uses an Andalite as a host. Throughout the series, the Animorphs carefully protect their identities. The Yeerks assume that the Animorphs are a strike force sent by the aliens, who are the creators originally of the transformation technology. To protect their families from Yeerk reprisals, the Animorphs maintain this facade. Though the Animorphs can assume the form of any animal they touch to acquire the DNA, there are several limitations to the ability. The most vital is that they cannot stay in animal form for more than 2 hours, or they will be unable to return to human form, and the morphs become permanent. Others include having to demorph back to human in between morphs, only tight clothing being able to be carried over with a morph, DNA allergies that can lose some control of the morphing ability, and having to consistently maintain concentration during a morph to prevent the animal's natural instincts from overwhelming their human intellect. A benefit to morphing is that it allows the team to heal any superficial non-genetic injury sustained as a human or in morph. And while in morph, they can telepathically communicate with anyone nearby in what they call thought speak. Let's jump into Happy Hour! I am so excited to talk about this series. Oh my goodness, this is one of my picks for the podcast. This is one of my favorite series as a kid, and honestly holds up and is still one of my favorite series, and I see it as my life's mission to get other people to read it, so thank you. My life's mission is nearing completion. Now, with that being said, and clearly my entire heart invested in this series. Just kidding. How did you guys feel about it?
Okay, I remember watching the show. It only ran for one season when I was a little kid.
The show is famously awful.
Very bad.
Yeah.
So that
Very
was,
funny that
I
was your
knew
intro to it.
of it. And also I don't know, I feel like growing up in the 90s, you just know Animorphs.
It's the weird
in general
book,
kind of
the
thing.
book covers, the weird animal changing.
Yeah. I consistently use it as an insult to people I don't like, where I'm like, you look like the middle stage of an Animorphs cover. But I really liked it. It's so intense for what is ultimately kind of a kid's book.
Yeah.
It's middle grade, is it not?
Yeah. It is, yeah. And this is only the beginning. It gets so much darker towards the end of the series. It's wild.
Yeah, it's really intense, and it threw me into a bit of an existential crisis at one point, defining what is the self, what is a person, what is a personality, what differentiates us, because it's not our physical form, and being non-binary, I really, really related to Tobias and the concept of being in a body that you don't necessarily agree with.
Yeah.
And there was a few moments
for
where
book 3 or book 1. Yeah, he gets stuck in morph in the very first book, so he gets stuck as a hawk. Yeah.
Some of the paragraphs and phrases and things like that were used, I was like, oh damn, that's how I feel all the time. I hate this. I love it, but I hate it, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So,
it's I see myself in this and I don't like it, kind of thing. I'm being attacked.
Yeah, I'm in this picture and I don't like it. Report. Yeah. So
yeah. Allison, how about you? I know you've said that you've mentioned that you were excited to talk about this.
I'm so excited. I have so many things to say. I remember being not allowed to read this series as a child.
Oh.
And I meant to ask my mom and I forgot last time I talked to her. Because I'm not sure if that's actually true or not, or if I'm remembering something incorrectly where she was like, oh, are you sure that might not be too scary for you? And I just interpreted that as you're not supposed to read it. Because they didn't really forbid me from reading very much, so I'm kind of surprised that they would have.
I think it was a thing for a while that in Christian communities, people were like, you should let your kids read this. Which I think started because they morph and change into other, and it was like, it's evolution. So it started in like the really fundamental communities. But then I think it also spread of just like, oh, I heard that this was bad. I probably shouldn't let my kid read it.
Because I was also not allowed to watch Care Bears, which I think is hilarious now.
What?
It's like a show about teddy bears and rainbows.
That's like the
it
nicest
was a thing in the Christian
show.
communities that it was like magic and bad and stuff. And so
Rugrats and Dragon Ball Z were the shows that I wasn't allowed to watch.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Anyway,
anyway, not to talk about
I think this is actually very
upbringings.
funny because one of my favorite series as a kid was this Star Wars series called Galaxy of Fear, which I only realized as an adult was a horror series. Like, I didn't really catch on to that.
How have I not heard about this?
Galaxy of Fear didn't...
I don't know how I didn't catch on to that. But it was, like, terrifying. There's a point where, like, one of the characters gets her brain taken out of her and put into, like, one of those spider robot droids in Jabba's palace. And, like, creepy stuff. And I loved it so much. So I think it's really funny that my parents were like, no, you can't read this. But sure, read this Star Wars novel.
My parents didn't let me watch The Simpsons, but they let me watch South Park.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, that's funny.
But I think it's just because they didn't know what it was. I didn't grow up in a religious household, so I think they were just like, The Simpsons is maybe a little intense for you, but South Park, they were like, sure.
Fine. That's hilarious.
Anyway, so I read this series now for the first time, and I read it through the lens of, oh, my 11-year-old self would have loved this so much.
Yeah.
And I was really impressed by a lot of things about it, particularly the body horror of the morphing itself.
It's
intense.
I feel like, sort of, as a writer, I might come at this by like, oh yeah, you can turn into cool animals and then you're an animal and you spy on stuff and blah blah blah. But K.A. Applegate went deep into like, what would being in this specific animal feel like?
Yes.
And like, what are some instincts you might have that you wouldn't have as a
like
human?
prey animals.
And so there's that scene where Jake turns into a lizard, and this is one of the first, it's not the very first, but it's one of the first shapes he's taken. And he does it in his locker. He turns into a lizard and he's just like overwhelmed and just like running around the locker, not being able to stop himself because he feels trapped and he can't control his instincts. And then he finally gets out and he describes having eyes on each side of his head, which is something I wouldn't even thought about, and how overwhelming and weird that is. And like, he can't really comprehend what he's seeing because he's not used to looking at the world like that. And I'm like, this is so interesting. Yeah. And then he sees a spider, and I was like, oh no. No,
I remember that scene. I was like, no.
And he feels the instinct to eat it, and he knows that this is gross and is super grossed out with it and is like fighting it, and he can't, and he goes and he eats the spider, and I'm like, no. That sort of element of body horror where your body is doing something that you don't want it to.
Or when they turn into ants and they're all like, they almost lose their minds because of the hive colony. So they almost become kind of like Borg-like, where they are just listening to the queen and not. And like the kids are clearly like traumatized by this. Like it was described as being like horrifying.
This is so traumatizing. Like, this is such a horror series.
And that's just the cool parts of getting to turn into animals, let alone the like battle and almost dying and killing things and even the process of turning into animals. Like, they talk about feel like, oh, I felt like, they say it's not painful, but you hear your like bones snapping and turning. You feel your organs like shriveling.
Very
and, like,
visceral. And then the whole Tobias turning into a hawk for several books. I didn't actually get to the point where he.
Do you want me to tell you?
There's a point where he becomes human. Yeah,
I want to know.
Actually, do you know what? Let's real quick just hop on over to Tavern Talk, because we're kind of already talking about the meat of the bone. So, Tavern Talk! Yes, so in book 7, which we read books 1 to 7, because they're pretty, they're kids' books, they're pretty short. There's 54 books total in the series, so I wasn't gonna, try and make us read all of them. So in book 7, they meet an alien called the Elemist, who's almost like a godlike being. Like, he's so powerful that he can, like, bend time and stuff like that. In book 13, he comes back, because there's 2 of the aliens, so they're called Pork Bajir, And they're this race
Yes.
of aliens that are covered in, like, essentially big knives, and they're really scary, and they're used as, like, the shock troops of the Yeerks. And the kids are all, like, terrified of them because they're awful. And they're all enslaved by the Yeerks. Like, their entire species has been infiltrated. 2 of them manage to get free, and the Elemist wants the Animorphs to help them save their species. And it turns out that they're actually not fearsome. They're actually tree-dwelling creatures, and they use their big knives to slice bark off and eat it. And they're also, like, very simple-minded and, like, gentle, but they've been taken over and turned into these horrible, like, monsters. But anyway, he wants the Animorphs to help, and in exchange, he actually, what he does is he doesn't turn Tobias back into a human, but he gives him his morphing powers back, and then through his time-shifting thing, he lets him acquire his own body, so he can now morph into his body, but only for 2 hours.
At a time.
And then,
that's
so
very fun.
Tobias goes through the most of any character in this series, like, between the, like, in book 3, he has this whole existential, like, trauma of, like, who am I? Am I a bird? Am I a human? And then that comes up again, because now it's like, oh, I have the choice. I could turn back into a human, stay and morph for 2 hours, and then I would be human again, but then he wouldn't be able to morph and wouldn't be able to keep fighting the fight. So now it's like an active choice for him to have to choose to be a hawk all the time. And it's
horrifying.
This series, man, is like wild and dark and fantastic.
I also have to give kudos to the author for just how bonkers the plot and world building of this series is. You know, we're like aliens invading Earth, but people changing into animals can fight them. And so I was curious. So after reading the books, I found a summary of the entire series. And I read it, and I was like, this is insane. It goes completely off the rails over and over again. I thought it made me very happy. So
it's really worth reading the whole thing. Like, if y'all, like, ever need, like, I think it's worth reading the whole series.
It's like baby's first anti-capitalist kind of book. You know what I mean?
So
like,
it's so
anti-war, and it's so the rhetorical devices used and the narratives and the comparisons are like very clear.
Yeah.
In a very understandable way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So this book has a lot of genres, so I kind of classify it as it's like an alien invasion, it's a children's book, and it's a war story. And each of those kind of have their own genre concept, so I kind of have some things for all of them. So alien invasion tropes usually have one of 2 things, which is either like it's an all-out attack, which I think is the most common, like we see in like War of the Worlds and stuff, where it's just like aliens are invading. And then there's the infiltration, where it's like aliens are among us, which this one is definitely the latter. Like, and it's actually interesting because that becomes a plot point of like the Yeerks want to infiltrate slowly because they don't want to do an all-out attack, because their whole thing is, well, we want human bodies to have as hosts. We don't want to fight and kill all the humans.
Right.
We want to sneakily conquer all the humans.
I like that this whole aliens need humans as hosts thing, because it does sort of avoid that, well, we can't kill them all. Like Stargate does that too. The main alien antagonists in Stargate are aliens that use humans as hosts. So it's like they want to enslave humans rather than destroy them.
Yeah. Which is necessary, I think, if you have aliens that are very technologically advanced, because otherwise it's like, well, yeah, why wouldn't they just
turn
the Earth into a ball of flames and kill all of us? So, like...
But also, narratively, it serves as the comparison to colonization, right? Like, if you're, when you're combining it to the other statements.
Or that, and also, like, the dehumanizing is, you're not a human, you're just an object.
You're a vessel, you're a body.
Yeah. Other tropes that are in aliens is if you have different alien species, you can have good aliens that help against the invasion, which we do get in... I mean, even in the 7 books that we read, we have the Elemist, who's kind of like this all-powerful being. He has his own kind of cosmological battle going on with kind of like his counterpart, who's like the evil devil alien, and they have this thing where it's like, we have rules of combat, which is how they get around the like, well, why doesn't he just fix everything? That's kind of why. And then later you also have like the Free Hork-Bajir and stuff who help out against the invasion. So you have the
and you have the very first alien that gives them their powers.
Who's dying. Oh my goodness, that scene is, again, like, you get really introduced to the darkness of this series fast, because like the very first scene is they find this alien that's crashed, he's dying. He gives them their powers, and then he gets eaten. The Visser turns into a giant monster and eats him. And they describe pieces of him falling out of his mouth and other aliens eating him. And it's just like, oh, you know what you're getting into with this series. It's gonna be... Yeah. Advanced alien technology, we definitely get that. The morphing technology, for example, is like a big one. one line that always stuck with me from this series is, I think it's in a later book, but they're talking about how like sufficiently advanced technology looks like magic if you don't understand it. And I'm like, yeah, that's very true.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, morphing could be I mean, it often is a fantasy trope, right? Like if you think of like Dungeons and Dragons, turning into animals as a druid is a magic thing. But in this,
shape-shifting often is magic, Yeah,
and like there's a bunch of other alien tech that shows up in here as well that we see. Often alien invasion tropes are a metaphor for real-world issues like colonialism and environmentalism, which Christiana's already pointed out very much shows up in this.
In general does that. That's I feel like that's almost its original purpose, is to like comment on these politics and the state of the world and the environment and stuff through a different lens, which is partly what I love about sci-fi. So.
Yeah, like the colonialism aspect, like metaphor in this is really strong, I think. Also the environmentalism, like through especially the character of Cassie, who's like each of the kids have a very strong like kind of character archetype, and Cassie is the like nature loving, animal obsessed character, and so her books often focus on the like the resource extraction nature of the Yeerks, like not only through invading people and like seeing people as a resource, but also like they don't care about the ocean. The Yeerks really don't care about the forests. Like there's many scenes of them exploiting Earth for other resources as well, which is an interesting metaphor to have tossed in there. I think those are the two big ones. And then also the war, but war wasn't really a metaphor. That's more just straight up part of the plot. Did you guys see any other present day metaphors or things in these earlier? I know you've only read like...
I mean, as people with disability and Christiana already mentioned this, just the body horror really kind of hits me. Like not having control over things that your body does. Like I really feel that as someone with a chronic illness.
Yeah. It really explores like that fear and frustration of my body is doing this thing that I can't stop. I can't do anything against. Yeah.
This wasn't as obvious or like explicit, but I think there is also stuff of like Christiana kind of mentioned as well of like gender nonconformity or transness, and like what is it like to be in a different body, or to like especially with Tobias. Like I think I've read a lot of stuff that like non-binary and trans folks really connect with Tobias's character of this like I do not feel on the inside the way that I am presenting on the outside, and how do I navigate that?
I thought what they did with his character in it was either the first book or the first two, where he's kind of obsessed with being in his hawk form at first. Like he loves it so much
because he has such a bad
home life. And so he's constantly in it, and the other characters are like, you need to like come out of that after 2 hours, and they're constantly warning him, and he's just like, but I'm so free and I can fly and it's amazing. And I'm like, that would totally be amazing. I would have trouble coming out of that too.
And that's the thing that comes up for him too, is like this kind of thing in the back of his head of like, did I actually stay in morph because I had to, or did I kind of choose to run out the clock? Which is like a thing that pops up. I will just note, just because it's nice to hear about beloved authors that are actually good, Kay Applegate has a trans child, I believe, if I'm remembering correctly, and has been very outspoken on Twitter about being like pro-trans. Lots of people refer to her, or in the Animorph community, as like the anti-Rowling, so it's just nice when an author is like, you know.
I was actually wondering if she was one person or if it was
she's multiple. So Kay Applegate is one person, but she also, like, Catherine Applegate is a person, but the author name, so she wrote with her husband, Grant. And then actually quite a few of the later books are ghost-written. Partly because there were so many of them and they were being churned out so fast, but also they got their start as ghostwriters. They also kind of wanted to like help out other authors.
Oh, that's cool.
The ghostwritten books, a lot of them are not as good. Some of the weaker books are ghostwritten, but so the Kay Applegate is primarily the two, Catherine and Grant, who wrote the books. Two contrasting tropes you often find in alien invasions, either like a dark approach, which is all focused on like horror and destruction, or like an optimistic one, which is like highlighting human ingenuity and maybe the possibility for peaceful coexistence. This one I think kind of does both. It's definitely darker, but they win in the end, and the Yeerks do not take over Earth. So that's kind of a little bit of, but I think it mostly is focusing on the destruction side, like the...
I sometimes have trouble with the hopeful approach because, like, I'm going to use Stargate as an example again. The main characters are, like, part of the government, part of the army or the Air Force, and, like, pessimistic me is like, they wouldn't be so kind to aliens that they encountered.
We can't even be kind to people. How are we going to be kind to aliens?
They would be killing all the people that, I don't know.
I'm also in
politely
the cynical
challenge
train.
that just from my time in the military, in the sense that at
That's
least
fair.
everyone I met in the Navy is a massive dork. And they would be
that's nice to know.
they'd be so hyped to
Like,
meet an
yay, the
alien. I
alien.
feel like
Oh, that makes me feel happy. Well, maybe I'm being
but
too
that's my
pessimistic
experience
then.
with my unit on my ship, kind of thing.
That's
but,
fair. I can't speak
they
for
were
no. I
all
think people in general would be really awful to aliens. Like, I think, what was that movie,
Yes.
District 9 or whatever, where they basically, like,
Yes,
apartheid
I think
thing.
District
I feel like
9
that's
is-
exactly how it would go. Like,
Yeah,
that's how
it's-
And I mean, Stargate also there's lots of people within the government that are trying to do exactly what I'm talking about, like kill the aliens and steal their technology. And the good characters are like, no, we need to be friends with them because we need allies.
Yeah.
So, like,
I
you know,
think
there is that.
District 9 is a really good movie. I really like that one for an
Yes.
alien invasion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One example that is a genuinely very bad movie, but I think blends the two genres. It's called Knowing, and it stars Nicolas Cage.
Is that
And
an M.
he
Night
starts-
Shyamalan movie?
I have no idea.
think it
I
might
just,
be, but yeah.
it's really bad.
Oh yeah,
Nicolas
is that the one
Cage
with like,
starts.
the tree and like it ends with like an Adam and Eve type thing or something? Like
Yes,
they rehabilitate
yes.
two children.
So
yeah, that's a horrible movie.
It's horrible. But I do think it was at least a little bit
Curse
interesting
you
in
for
that
making me remember that
he-
in the back of my brain.
he starts like receiving these messages, uncoding them. The whole world dies, but because he received these messages, he gets these two kids off to an alien planet where they're now going to repopulate the human species, which is also genetically a problem.
Yeah, it like ends with them with like a shot of a tree, like it's the tree of good and
Yeah, and they're
evil,
running
it's
through a
Genesis
field
starting
together,
over. There's a
yeah.
rabbit, I think, or something. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
wait, so their kids are gonna have sex with each other?
Yeah,
to
exactly. That's the
repopulate?
implication.
Yeah, okay.
That's the implication.
The human race
But I
is
thought it was
screwed.
interesting at the very least to be like, okay, these aliens invade, so to speak, but they create a Noah's Ark kind of situation where it's like, okay, we're going to kill your whole planet, but like give us some of you so we can repopulate and put you on a planet that isn't going to die, because part of it was environmentalism. And I was like, okay, that's like like I said, horrible movie, but an interesting take on the whole alien invasion and what they want and what their purpose is. So a zoo, a human zoo.
Yes, which actually comes up in this series a little bit. Like in book 7, the Ellimist kind of gives them the option. He's like, you guys can either take your families and all leave Earth and at least the human species will survive, or you can stay and fight. And like they have to make the really hard decision of like, do we stay and fight or... Yeah. So those are kind of the main alien invasion tropes that I thought we should cover. And then there's also, of course, these are also children's books. These are middle grade books, which have their own set of tropes. So often you have like a child or teenage protagonist and like reasons why they can't enlist adult help.
I really liked the reason in this one. It's like, well, no one's gonna believe them.
Like, and also they could be the alien, like they could be a Yerk. You could tell your parent, and like even like one of the like Jake's brother, they'd find out in the first book is a controller, which is what they call people infested by Yerks. Like, so any of their parents could be. So you can't, or the police, or you know, they find out their vice principal is like nobody in authority is safe to talk to because they.
Yeah, sometimes I find the reasons are a little flimsy in children's literature. But yeah, this was really good.
It held up very well.
I will say I struggled with the reason the tiniest bit, just from like a purely like human perspective, where I was like, oh, I don't like the idea of teaching kids that any adult in their vicinity could be the enemy.
Could be dangerous. Yeah.
Could be dangerous to them, which is like
kids
kind of true.
Understand
but they're smart enough to figure out that there's not a Yerk invasion.
Infected by brain slugs. Of course.
I don't know. Like... There's some people I work with where I doubt it, but
there's someone in your life who you dislike? They're a brain slug.
A controller.
A controller. Going along with the like protagonist being children, that lends itself to also like a trope being of like the young people have little to no experience with whatever they're going to encounter, which like is definitely, you get that throughout the whole, like as they go, they kind of gain experience, of course, but like you definitely get the very much the sense of, like these are kids who are like floundering. You find out it's not revealed until the end, so they start the series at like 13, and then the series takes place over about 3 years total, so they end at 16, which definitely comes up as like a, you know, they're kids who are trying to fight a war and they're not always good at it and they don't always make good decisions and like trying to figure out strategy and stuff.
That is also often a general trope in sci-fi and fantasy where you have a character who doesn't really know what's going on or doesn't understand the world, because then as the reader, you sort of feel like you're along for the ride and learning with them.
Yeah.
Which is really helpful because in sci-fi and fantasy, there's this whole world that's different from ours that you can't expect your readers to already understand how it works. And so it's helpful.
Yeah. And then also part of like being a child or teenage protagonist is that you often have to like lead a double life, and your world-saving antics have to fit into regular life, like school and chores, which definitely comes up in this series. Like they're always talking about like they have a paper due, and like I have to go save the world, but I have to like write an exam, and like it comes up that they like get grounded by their parents because they're sneaking out to go fight the aliens, and then they have to sneak out again, and it like strains the like it's it definitely and that kind of adds to both like tension as well as like comedy. Like you can play it kind of both ways, and this series kind of does both.
I think it's also realistic to the metaphors of real world issues, right? Like we're all trying to deal with these really intense things that are impacting our lives and trying to make an impact, but we still have to show up to work, otherwise we can't pay our rent, we can't pay the bills, kind of thing, right?
And specifically relatable to kids who are like I have
absolutely
school.
They have very little control over their routine and their schedule.
And you're experiencing everything for the first time as like a teen, right? So it's like everything is more heightened. It's like, how am I supposed to go to school when I'm going through this like friendship problem that is the biggest emotional problem I've ever faced? Like,
never mind
do I
warring
deal with
against
that?
alien slugs.
Yeah. So, which also, again, kind of explicitly comes up a couple of times in the books. Like, there's one time Jake is talking to his mom, and she's talking about, like, how tough it is to be a teenager and that she understands. And he's like, yes, and also.
Also, by the way.
Do you understand, though?
Do you, though?
Yeah, exactly. And then, so I wanted to kind of go through those because they're a little bit quicker. And the one I think we're going to probably have the most talk about is, like, this being a war story and, like, all of the stuff that go into a war genre tropes. And one of them is, of course, war is hell. War is awful. Like, I'm glad that they leaned into that with the darkness of this series, because
me too.
That is what war is like, and you can't really like gloss over it or make that palatable.
I mean, I think some sci-fi stories may try to sort of glorify, or at least maybe not anymore. I don't think that's very common anymore.
I feel like in our episode about Skyward by Brandon Sanderson,
I
don't want to say it was like glorified,
but it kind of was, because the pilots fighting the battles were like the top of society and like worshipped almost.
Which was balanced by other characters dying. Kind of without fanfare and applause.
The novel itself, like Brandon Sanderson wasn't saying this war is good.
But the
like,
world, the inside the
but the world,
sure was. Yeah. I think people would often jump to like, well, you shouldn't have that in a kid's book. But I think it's kind of important to
kids
put that
are
into
experiencing war.
Yeah.
Kids are experiencing violence. Like that's the thing and kids are smarter than we think they are.
Yeah, there's very little you actually can't put in a kid's book. It's just how you do it.
Yeah,
exactly.
And that's not to say that you should like show your kid rated R movie. Like there's still levels of appropriateness, but like some amount of, and like also your kid better, right? Like not everything's appropriate for one kid that is for another kid. But I think that just like you can't blanketly say, well, none of this should ever be in a kid's book, because that's just, and kids are going through stuff, right? Like things like gender identity and like all of that kind of stuff. They need a place to explore that, and like sci-fi and like
and even if they're kind of stuff. Not necessarily going through it, they need the opportunity to learn about it in an age appropriate way. And often it's through fiction that provides that opportunity to build empathy and to understand what these situations kind of look like, right? Maybe it's weird to say, but I think there needs to be more children's literature that tackles war, that tackles violence and colonialism and these sort of things, because it allows children to explore safely. It's not them directly experiencing it. It's through a character they relate to. And they get to understand a bit more about the world.
The end of the series is very tough because it's very bittersweet. Like it's not a happy ending. So in the end, in the final like battle, they're like having the ship fight. So one of the first big things is Jake makes the decision to flush like 50,000 Yeerks out of a pool into space, where they essentially are killed instantly as like a diversion. And that is a thing that comes up as like well, you just killed 50,000 kind of helpless creatures, and they were trying to invade Earth, but also they were
But
helpless.
also,
so
yeah.
like, so that is like a horrible thing that like tortures him forever. Rachel goes after, so the whole series, Jake is trying to protect his brother, Tom, who's a controller, trying to free him. But in the end, they have to kill him. And the only person who can do it is Rachel. So she also goes kind of like, she, of all the characters, she's the one who's shown kind of like liking the battle. Like she's an adrenaline junkie. She's like kind of gets reckless. And like that gets more intense as it goes on, where people are kind of like, you're scaring us with like how much you're into this.
But she also struggles with it internally, even in the first few books of why do I enjoy this?
Yeah. So she gets sent after Tom. She ends up killing Tom, and then she is killed. So it ends with her dying. So like nobody is safe. Yeah. The most heart-wrenching thing in any media that I have because it's hard to explain, but like while they're battling, they have it on the view screen so they can like see each other on these two different ships. She's on the one ship fighting Tom, and all the other Animorphs are on the other ship. And as she's fighting, she is in her bear morph. She ends up like she's dying, so she has to morph back to human. And she looks at the screen and she sees, I'm gonna like cry. She sees Tobias, who has morphed into his human form, and she says, as I saw him, I knew why he did it, and it's because humans cry and hawks don't cry. And I'm just like, oh my goodness, like,
I'm literally tearing up with you describing that.
It's so emotional. And then there's this line about like, I was already dead and I was missing my life, and I was already dead and he was mourning me, and then like the polar bear kills her, and it's like so sad.
Oh my
and then
goodness.
there's like this last scene where she like kind of before like in the like twilight between life and death, like Ellimist comes to her and she's like, I asked him, what anybody wants to know, like, was I important? Did I matter? Was my life matter? And he's like, you were good, you were brave, you mattered. And it's just like, it's so
goodness
heart-wrenching. But then also, so that's like the beginning of the last book, and then the rest of the last book kind of goes through like all the steps of after the war, of like how the world kind of sees aliens, and it's like it's time jumpy, and it like goes through the next like kind of few years. None of the characters are okay. Tobias basically takes off and never talks to any of them again. Jake is absolutely like broken and haunted because of this decision to like not only kill all of these Yeerks, but then also Tom died and Rachel died. And a lot of people had, like, obviously were not happy with this ending because you kind of want your characters to get a happy ending.
But that's the correct ending.
Yeah. And they complained about it to Applegate, and then she actually wrote, she has like this letter that's out where she's like, you don't like the ending of the series, you don't like that Jake is broken and Tobias is forever changed and Rachel's dead. Write your congressman and tell them not to send us to war because this is what happens in wars. Yeah. And it's just like, that's absolutely, like that is that is what war does. There's my monologue, my Animorphs monologue.
No, I appreciate it. Here's my monologue with Tobias specifically, and with the idea of a war story and kind of becoming someone you don't necessarily recognize. My little philosophical quandary with this book was like, what defines the self? And I think that is what I really enjoyed about it. And specifically the world building is this concept of shifting forms and being kind of overrun by instincts that aren't necessarily familiar to you. Like, how do you define the self? I was having this conversation with my spouse, actually, just the other day as we were talking about this. I was like, what is a self? What is a person? Define a person. Define a self to me. And he was like, oh, well, it's like self-awareness. And I was like, well, our cats aren't self-aware, but our cats clearly have personalities and routines and all these things. Is that a self? Am I a self? Like, what? For me, it's like the expression of a learned set of actions through lived experiences. But then I also don't like that because then maybe ChatGPT is a self.
Oh, no.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, how do you define what you are as a person? And I think I was thinking about it, and I see this a lot in the series, is because of the world building and because of what the characters are able to do, is some people define themselves based off of their internal monologue, and some people define themselves based off of the actions they put out into the world. So like Tobias, I think, struggled a lot with, in the beginning at least, I am not myself because my internal monologue has changed. I have these instincts that I don't recognize. But then he was able to do actions to help people, to help when the Yeerks were trying to take over some wildlife and stuff like that. And I think it was book 2.
Yeah. Being
able to impact the world and others around him and realize he's still the same person. So he defined himself by his relation to others. Whereas I think some of the other characters define themselves, like Cassie, I think, defined herself by her relationship to herself and her internal monologue. It was just all very heady, and that's where I said I had like a bit of an existential crisis reading this, where I'm like, what is the self? How do I define myself?
Crisis that Animorphs sets up.
We've talked about this for a long time, so I'm just going to quickly go through some of the other war tropes. We've kind of talked about them, but just to make them explicit. So, like, the fact that it's the brutal and callous force of wartime authority overrides all individual thought. This kind of comes up because they elect Jake as their leader, and sometimes that causes conflict. And, like, how do we decide what we're doing? Do we all have to function as a group, or do we have individual, paths that we want to take? Sometimes war is shown to be unwinnable, regardless of sacrifices made and moral codes abandoned. In this series, we do end up winning, but, oftentimes it's like, nobody wins. Often, war stories show the cumulative long-term effects of exposure to pain, deprivation, violence, and military culture. Like, the horror goes on, dehumanizing everybody a little bit more with each fight, which comes up constantly. Like, you see the kids, like, turn into completely different versions of themselves, like, traumatized by the end of the series, which is so sad. And then also a trope in war stories is often like the horror of the war spreading to your homeland, in which your town, city, or nation is directly attacked or even invaded by a powerful military force. What's worse, this causes your friends, family, and former non-combatants to be caught in the crossfire where they can easily die. And that's kind of the case from the beginning for our characters, because they already have people who are in the line of fire from the beginning who are already part of this war.
And that's often a secret identity trope where, like, if the enemies find out my family's in danger,
Yeah, totally. Which is like what raises the stakes too, right? Because it's like it's not only they could die, but if they are discovered, then everybody they love will also be enslaved or killed, or Let's hop on over to Proprietor's Pick. Allison, what book do you have for us that is similar to this series?
Yeah, this was a really tough one because I find I find the older the book is, the tougher it is to find something similar, because the publishing landscapes just change, and like tropes change and trends change, and it's like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to find like an alien war story for
animal
children.
shape-shifting.
But so I think I hit shape-shifting and middle grade.
All right.
Let's see.
Sounds amazing.
2 out of 4.
It's called Ice Wolves by Amy Kaufman, and here's what it's about. Everyone in Valen knows that ice wolves and scorched dragons are sworn enemies who live deeply separate lives. So when 12-year-old orphan Anders takes one elemental form and his twin sister Reyna takes another, he wonders whether they are even related. Still, whether or not they're family, Reyna is Anders' only true friend. She's nothing like the brutal, cruel dragons who claimed her as one of their own and stole her away. In order to rescue her, Anders must enlist at the foreboding Ulfar Academy, a school for young wolves that values loyalty to the pack above all else. But for Anders, loyalty is more complicated than obedience, and friendship is the most powerful shape-shifting force of all.
It's always the power of friendship at the end of the day.
I mean, it's got wolves and dragons, so obviously I'm gonna pick this one.
Yeah, and it sounds like it's got some of those like existential crises. Maybe not quite as dark as Animorphs.
Probably not quite as dark and like horror-ish, but still seems like a really fun middle grade series. So check that one out.
That sounds great. And with that, we are at last call. So here are our concluding thoughts and questions to help you world build based on what we've learned in Animorphs. Cristiano, what do you take away from the world building of this series that we can learn from?
As per my very unfortunately long rant about the concept of the self, it sounds so heady and annoying, but look into philosophy. Like, genuinely, there are some things that the average reader might not necessarily always engage with, especially if you're going for middle grade. The concept of, this is not a pipe kind of thing, right? Like existentialism, all that kind of stuff. You can really explore that, and I think it adds a lot, especially when you're including war or violence in your story. Maybe it's my slight military experience, speaking to veterans and people who have experienced that kind of thing. A lot of it is a lot more psychological than it is physical. And so if you want to hit that, you gotta get a little weird about it. And I think Animorphs does that very well.
Totally. Allison, what do you take away from the series for us to learn about world building?
Something I quite liked about this series that we haven't mentioned is that each book is narrated by a different character. Which I actually really liked. And I often don't like that because I usually get attached to one character and then I want to stick with them. But I think it worked really well. And when I'm writing an edit letter, when I edit a novel, I will usually write an entire long PDF letter to the author and highlight different areas that need to be strengthened or can be worked on. And almost every time I'll have a section on character arcs and character personalities and how the author can deepen their characters and make them feel really different from each other. Because I think something that you naturally do as a writer is sort of insert yourself into your characters. And then sometimes what happens is they all sound a little bit similar if you do that. And so you have to really learn how to step outside yourself and really get into how a character with a different backstory or different upbringing might react to things differently than you would. And I think this is a really good example of this because you have 5 very different characters. They have very different backstories, very different upbringings, and this affects the way that they react to things, the way that they talk. They all feel very distinctly different. Like we sort of touched on a little bit, Cassie is the animal-loving, sort of nature-loving one.
The pacifist, gentle
character. So she's going to respond differently to the one who's a little bit jerky at the beginning.
Marco. The logical tactician, the ruthless one. Yeah.
Of course, Tobias has his whole, his upbringing has been terrible, and so he reacts differently to being in an animal's body than some of the others do. So it could be really helpful to think about, what's my character's backstory? How does that make them different than the other characters? And then B, also, what are your characters' goals? Think about what do they want most in life more than anything else.
Yeah.
And then that often shows you how they will react and how they make decisions and stuff like that. Tobias really wants to be free, so that really changes how he feels about being in this hawk form. And Jake, he seems to just really want to protect other people. I haven't read enough, but I'm sure Emma can speak more to that.
Yeah,
but
I like that about the opening of this series is, like you said, they're all narrated by different authors or by different characters, and they go in order, so it's always it's Jake, then it's Rachel, then it's Tobias.
Oh, that pattern continues.
Yes, although Tobias and Axe switch, so we do get books from Axe's perspective as well, but they trade off, so both of them don't have as many books as the rest, which is too bad, because Tobias is my favorite character. So
same.
I like Tobias.
But what I really like is each of the characters' first books really establishes what they want and why they're fighting this war. In Jake's, you get his brother's a controller. That's why he's doing this. He wants to save him. In Rachel's, it's her best friend's parents have been taken over by Yeerks, which is absolutely heartbreaking. There's this, her friend is absolutely going through it because her parents, who are now aliens, no longer love her, and she's what did I do wrong? Why don't they love me anymore? Which is horrible. So that's Rachel's motivation is all the people who are going through this with their families. Tobias's is he had a really strong connection to the alien, which another fun spoiler turns out through time and morphing and stuff is actually his father. So Elfangor is Tobias's. Yeah, he was on Earth for a while in a human morph. So Axe is his uncle, and that comes up, and that's kind of a fun, interesting thing. And Tobias, wants to be free, you identified as well. So he has a big problem with people being. They all don't like people being enslaved, but for Tobias, that's a really personal thing.
Yeah.
For Cassie, it's the Earth and seeing how the nature is being affected by the Yeerks. And then Marco, in his book, because he's the most reluctant to join because his mother passed away 2 years ago and his father has essentially fallen into a deep depression. And Marco's if I die, my dad will never recover. Then in his book, we found out his mom is actually a controller. She is Visser 1.
Yes.
She's been taken over and so faked her death. And so then that becomes Marco's buy-in for why he wants to fight. So, they really clearly established... Sorry, I've turned Last Call back into Tavern Talk, but I just really like that Allison pointed that out. So, this series does a really good job at establishing what the characters want, which then makes it so that it makes sense throughout the whole rest of the series. So absolutely.
But I feel it also does a good job of using the world building to take what they want and then turn it against them.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yep.
Yeah, because you need to
yeah.
have what they want and then something getting in the way of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I never thought about that, but you're right. And then also it being awful. It's like being fulfilled by a genie's wish. Tobias wants to be free, gets stuck as a bird.
Yeah.
Jake
Yeah.
wants
Yeah.
to free his brother from being a controller. He gets killed, so kind of is
Yeah.
freeing. Marco, oh, no! This is horrifying to have realized this. It's so tragic. Back to last call. What I think you can learn from or take from this is clear rules for your world can really help to raise the stakes and build tensions. Like it being very clearly outlined, like you have 2 hours in morph.
Yes.
Really like heightens that we have to morph back. So that can be often. I think we don't like putting rules in because we feel like, I don't know, it's less fun. But rules actually I think are a great way to make novels more fun.
It forces you to be more creative because
Yes.
you now have to work around them.
Yeah.
Right?
And like one of the most important things in story is stakes, and you can't really have stakes if you don't know what the rules are, because then you don't know what there is to lose
Exactly.
or how you lose it.
Yeah.
And then a second bonus thing is write about what you're passionate about. I feel like Applegate is super passionate about animals and animal facts, and that just comes through because there's
It
so
really
much
does.
just like stuff about animals that's so fun. If your niche is whatever, put that in your book. People will find it fun. People are engaged with stuff that you love. So put more animal facts into your books.
Love is certainly
also my advice.
It's infectious, right? Like love and adoration is infectious. So if you love it, they'll love it.
And with that, we are at closing time. We would love to stay longer. I could talk about this for 12 hours. I will start my own secondary podcast where I just rant about Animorphs. Thank you so much to Christiane and Allison for talking about this with me and to listeners. And I probably stole too much airtime, so I apologize. But thank you so much for...
I'm glad you recommended this one. I'm happy to look at it. Yeah.
I really, really suggest that everybody read it, and you should read the whole series. Yes.
I don't know if I want to commit to 50 books.
That's fair. It is a lot. But they read so
fair.
fast, though. They're so short.
That's true.
With that, yes, we would love to stay longer, but we all have 54 Animorphs books to read, so we have to get out of here. Thank you so much for joining us at the tavern. If hands-on world building is something that interests you along with these more theoretical discussions, then you should absolutely check out our world building workshops. These are bonus monthly episodes where we build a different element of a world in every session, and these are available for patrons at our $5 and up tiers at patreon.com/worldbuilderstavern. In this month's episode, which is already out for you to listen to right now, we built a religion. So go check those out for sure. Also, if you do subscribe as a patron, thank you from the bottom of our hearts. That really helps us. We all have, jobs and things to maintain. So this is, having some extra resources to put together this podcast really helps us out. So thank you so much. You let us do this.
Yeah.
You can also check out our description for a link to help a Palestinian family escape Gaza. And you can find us on our website, worldbuilderstavern.com, which has links to our TikTok, Discord, and our bookshop.org page, where you can buy books we talk about on the podcast, which supports both us and an indie bookstore. We hope to serve you here again soon, but until next time, scram!
Bye.
Get out of here.